From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we break down the Broncos' loss to the Tennessee Titans 17-10. A frustrating performance there, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. They get up 10 points in the first half. And then, of course, the Tennessee Titans score a touchdown at the end of the second quarter, so you're up 10-7, and you just really could not get anything going in the second half of this game. Meanwhile, Tennessee Titans, they put up 10 points in the second half, and they end up winning this game. I don't know where to start on this one exactly, Ben. I really thought the defense, I thought the scheme, I thought everything that the defense put together was really, really strong. You had a couple of mistakes, obviously the flea flicker being the biggest one. But once again, for the offense, it's just... they didn't even get to the red zone. Like we didn't have to have conversations about, hey, what were they in the red zone and how bad? No, they didn't even get to the red zone in this game. So where do you want to start?
I want to start with this. 10 points is inexcusable in an NFL football game. 17 points allowed by your defense should be enough to win the overwhelming majority of your football games. This is an absolute failure on the offense and the people who game plan this. You had a bye week. You had 2 weeks to get this done. You had a bye week to scheme it up against the Tennessee Titans, who were without 5 starters, and you didn't get to the red zone once. You got 10 total points, 7 of which came on a busted coverage that an otherworldly speed guy took advantage of on an audible from the quarterback. So I am beyond frustrated at this point. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to, I've tried my absolute best to be patient, but I am beyond frustrated at this point. This is the point where it's time to say, okay, this isn't working. What you're doing is not working, and it is time to make changes.
Yeah, you feel like you're beyond the point of it's growing pains. You're beyond the point of they're still trying to figure things out. Again, and maybe you were by that way a few games ago. We could have said that a few games ago, but you try to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt because you kept seeing just sort of flashes. The Jaguars game was an example of another flash forward, right? You had three for three in the red zone. It seemed like the offense had found some rhythm at times. So you just sort of thought, okay, well, they can find something going into the bye week with that performance, and they can build on that. Instead, it looked like regression. Russell Wilson completing 50% of his passes, taking 6 sacks. Now, some of that had to do with a new center, right? Luke Wattenberg obviously contributed a couple of those sacks, but there's just so much about the offense that just isn't clicking. You still don't have a run longer than 17 yards this season, which blows my freaking mind. After 9 games of the season, there can't be another single team in the league that has that much of a problem running the ball.
Well, it is not just that. I mean, it's systemic throughout the entire offense. It's supposed to be a West Coast offense. When was the last time you saw a slant? Tell me when the last time you saw a slant was, because I can't remember it. At least one that was targeted. These are long developing concepts with an offensive line that's a shell of itself, running on third stringers in some cases, that's not able to block this stuff up that long. Like, what are you doing? Like, be the coach that takes advantage of or plays to the advantage or the strengths of his guys or the weaknesses of his guys. Like, hey, look, we're not able to do this, so how am I going to scheme this up better? And it's just frustrating because Coach Hackett's a good dude. Like, he's a fun guy. He's a nice guy. He's easy to root for. If you know him, he's an easy guy to root for. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting it done, you're not getting it done. And he's not getting it done. They're not scheming to the advantage of their players. They're just not doing it. And, I don't know if that's the quarterback insisting we're going to do things this way or if it's the head coach insisting we're going to do things this way. But it certainly looks like the head coach because this isn't exactly the offense Russ has ever run or looked like running prior to this. Even with a hurt thumb in Seattle last year, he was still more effective than this. So there are systemic problems here, and you've got to fix them. And you're at the point where you've got to put ego aside. Give up the play calling. You give up. It's not working with you, so give it up. You can't sit there on ego and continue to call plays that aren't working and continue to call an offense that isn't working. And I understand that this is your dream and this is your dream job. But if you want to keep that job, you got to find a way to get more points out of this offense. And it's not with you running it.
Yeah, certainly for where the Broncos are at. And remarkably, every other team in the AFC West besides the Chiefs lost yesterday. So remarkably, the Broncos really did miss
pace.
Yeah, remarkably, they're in keeping pace. If they would have won, they would have been 1 game out of the playoffs. Instead, they fall back a little bit. But understanding you still have 2 games coming up between the Raiders and the Panthers. And I'm not trying to sell hopium here. I'm just more talking about hey, for the rest of the locker room, at least where they're at right now, what do you look at? What do you do? And certainly what you're doing won't beat anybody. The 10 points is not going to beat anybody. So having conversations about, well, if you can win the next 2 games really starts with, can you even score
Can you
20
score
points,
enough
20 points.
to beat the Carolina Panthers?
And
That's
at this point, I really don't know.
I will say this. Cortland Sutton got up after the game and had a big fiery speech in that locker room to the offense.
Offense and defense, both sides of the ball we're talking about.
Yeah, and there's some offensive guys that said he said some things that needed to be said. Maybe that begins a turnaround this week. You know, for me, I'm always going to be hopeful that there's going to be that turnaround. But I've gotten to the point where the something has to change outweighs the hope that it can change at this point, and that's just where I'm at. I know, you and I, we always try to be optimistic about things because there's enough pessimism out there in the world. But we're at the point with this where something has to change. What has been done so long has not worked. You had 2 weeks to scheme up the Titans, and this was what you came up with, and it was an abject failure. The Titans are a one-dimensional football team.
Yeah.
All right. And they had 5 starters out on defense, and you could only get 10 points. That is failure.
Yeah, and one of the funny things, too, is I remember talking to the guys on the Sports Zoo on KOA about the difference in quarterback between Malik Willis and Ryan Tannehill. And with Ryan Tannehill, it's a little more precision with the passing game. But once again, it's still 17 points. Mm-hmm. It's 17 points last week against Kansas City. Guess what? They had 17 points the week before against the Texans. The Tennessee Titans, I think you put it perfectly. They're exactly who we thought they were. And the Broncos defense did exactly what they needed to do to put you in position. Yeah, of course, you wouldn't want to give up the flea flicker touchdown. That was a big backbreaker. But it's not often that Damari Mathis and PJ Locke are going to run into each other and take each other out of the play.
Right.
So some of what was inflicted to the Broncos in this team was on themselves, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But I thought the defense, the scheme that Ejiro Evero put together was just tremendous. Missing Baron Browning, missing Bradley Chubb, who was just traded, missing Randy Gregory. I know you only got 1 sack in the game, but guess what? You got a lot of pressures on Ryan Tannehill in this one. And again, Derrick Henry had 53 rushing yards, 2.8 yards per carry. You did exactly what you needed to do on the defensive side of the ball. Defensively,
the Broncos are getting done. They are the best defense in the NFL and the worst offense in the NFL. And that has not occurred in an NFL season at the same time for anybody since 1946 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The last team that had that flipped the other way around was the 2000 Rams, where they had the best offense and the worst defense. And you could have a good enough offense and make it to the playoffs. You can't have a great defense and the worst offense and just make that. You just can't do it.
Can't do it. Yep. So I'd say a lot of soul searching, but at this point, you're midway through the season. There's really no time for it. Yeah. You have to immediately turn around and prepare for the 2-7 Las Vegas Raiders. And just because of their record is 2-7, one of those wins was against the Broncos, and they always get up for this game. Mm-hmm. So they look broken. They look beaten down. But the Broncos are not a team that really can play with any kind of confidence in knowing what they are and what they can even represent. But this is a game, I mean, gosh, the Raiders have had the number for the last few years. You got 13 straight losses to the Chiefs. One way or another, those are going to be markers coming up for this team and for this coaching staff. You've got to find a way to win some games in your division because right now, the way this thing is constituted, the way this thing is headed, lots of changes on the horizon.
Got to make the playoffs to save your job, and if that means you've got to win every game but one, basically, and maybe all of them in order to do that, and it doesn't look promising at this point.
No, it doesn't. Not when you put up only 10 points. All right. Well, I have plenty of reaction over the course of the week, including a preview of the Las Vegas Raiders matchup this weekend. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Denver's going to win! You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.